Dead meme.
Welcome back. Let's play some V Rising. Or mostly, let's talk about whether or not it's worth buying for $22 Canadian. So I'm just going to briefly discuss the game, things I like about it, things I don't like. And that'll hopefully let you know whether or not you want to throw money at this, or maybe jump back in and play it. Just some word of acknowledgement here. There is an update coming in May, so I figured maybe I'll jump on this now, because some people may decide to look it up pretty soon to decide whether or not it's worth getting invested again. So let's just jump right in. Let's just go straight into presentation. So for the most part, as you can see, I'm on the second highest shadow detail and everything else is maxed. The game is rather pretty. Shadows are a big deal in this game. Like, after all, you're a vampire. When the sun comes up, that becomes a problem. And just to give you an idea of what some of the animations may look like. So here we go. And that's teleporting around the world. And here we go. Here's a neat one. So we'll shapeshift into a new animal. Or at least into the wolf form, which is something you can get a little bit. It's not very late in the game. Here we go. So combat. Let's do some fighting. And it's moderately flashy, right? Ooh, got me good. And there we go. As you can see, we could feed. We can do the classic vampire absorption of life and whatnot. So this gives you an idea of what to expect graphics-wise, I believe. Like, we'll cut down some trees. Resource gathering is a part of the game as well. Here, let's use some axes. And that's some additional animations, like when you harvest from the world. You see it, right? It's like not a... It just doesn't disappear. It's not so jarring. And there are a lot of little animals to kill, but we're getting a bit off topic. What I'd like to talk to you about next is mostly the sound. And as you could probably tell, you mostly hear sound effects. And that's not because there is no music in the game. It's that it is very quiet, except for when you're fighting like bosses and things like that. And it's relatively, it's really good for the situation it's in. It feels appropriate. So if I'll shut up for a moment and you can listen to what's going on now. It's just a somber little quiet walking through the wilderness. So the music is appropriate. The sound effects are decent. I would give the presentation, it's overall pretty good. Now, where I think this game is probably going to maybe irk some people is maybe the combat style, because this game is merging two genres. Like, as we could see here, this kind of looks a bit like something you might see at a Dota. I'm using like WASD, and you can play this in a controller. I've got friends who do. I don't know why. But this game is pretty much... It makes me feel like League of Legends, but you could use WASD to move, right? So you can use the mouse to look around. So I actually really enjoy the combat. I like how the game is mostly skill shots. The most part, most bosses are pretty decent. Like, you must defeat a lot of bosses in order to really advance the storyline in the game. But it's unfortunate on how difficult some of them are. And if you attempt to, like, say, double team them, the strength level of these bosses, like, just skyrockets. It's a touch frustrating, but it's not unfair. You can prepare for these bosses. So let's get into that. This is fundamentally a strategy, not a strategy game. It's more of a survival meets a MOBA style combat game. So as you can see, I'm running around the world collecting this stuff. So as we run around the world collecting this stuff, it obviously has uses. Like, I can acquire stones, can acquire lumber. Earlier you saw me acquire some silver ore. Normally silver is a very bad thing for a vampire to handle, but there's some items and gear equipment that you'll get that will kind of boost your resistance. So it's not like it's not perfect, but it definitely helps you out. And so basically you're going to, let's call it the map. You're going to be looking around throughout the world for places of interest. This is where you're going to get a lot of the loot from. So you're going to acquire silver from the silver mine, and you're going to smelt it down with some other components in order to make silver that's wearable for a vampire. Now that's a late game recipe. You don't need to worry too much about that. But just to keep that sort of thing in mind, that fundamentally this game has a lot of harvesting involved. It can be a bit grindy. And as much fun as the combat is, like, it'll get old, you know? When you're trying to just grind up enough material to get a piece of equipment to help you reach a gear score at a reasonable level to fight whatever boss it is you're coming up on. So something to keep in mind. Yeah, it's a survival game. You harvest everything from plant fiber to lumber to ore, and you're going to need to process all that. So I'm going to go jump to my other castle and show you that now. So here we are in our main castle. I am playing this with some friends. It is definitely a game better with friends. Playing it alone, not fun. I don't think it's worth really your time. But for the most part, if you can find some friends to play with, or you are okay with the community, jump in there. You should have a good time. So as you can see, I've got some material in this crafting station, and if I put all of this stuff on the production side, we can see it begins producing this primordial essence. Now, that's a late game recipe. Don't be too concerned with it. And of course, there is a different kind of room. So this room's floor designates it as a workshop, as long as it's enclosed with some walls and a door. And this is the alchemy station where potions be. You can make more potions for less material. And in this one, you get more material from processing materials. So instead of 20 wood for a plank, it's 15 because of the floor, and so on and so on. So there's a little bit of base management that goes on. Not overly advanced. Like, it's not that it's a bad thing. It just feels very limited. Like, I think that Valheim handled upgrade stations and other various building upgrades better. Like, decorating your house in Valheim will give you a rested state, which is a very potent buff. And I just kind of wish they would do something like that in this game. It would be a little bit more interesting, in my opinion. But we're not here to really talk about Valheim. The other neat thing is you could share research. So as my friends and I have collected various research, if you do come back to the table where the research was done, it'll be available for you to learn. And there's also the other staple of being a vampire. When you build a base, you can recruit NPCs, and you can let them wander your base, or you can send them on missions. And so here's an example. This is our little servant room. And we just kind of put them in there so that they stay out of trouble and stay alive. You could eventually build a throne. And it'll call up the map, and you can do some fun stuff. Like, you can deploy your guys out on some missions here. Let's select Herald. Let the hunt begin. So basically, these guys are going to go out, and they're going to harvest for me, so I don't have to. Now, granted, they're not nearly as potent as a player would be. But, you know, every little bit is helpful. And, of course, there's a meta on whether or not a character is going to be worthwhile to use based on, like, their backgrounds. If you recruit an individual, an NPC, and bring them back and convert them into your little clan, depending on their background. Like, here's a good example. Whisper, which is a really frail little female, but she has a humble appearance. And she's from the farmlands. So I can send her to a territory like this one where humble appearance is useful. And her other buff here, so that will bring her strength is only 450, but because she is actually at the appropriate class, she only requires a strength of 400. And of course you can give your hand-me-downs to these characters, and that's how you can give them some equipment. You can of course make them top of the line stuff, if you had so chosen. So for the most part, this game can be rather grindy. Here is another great example of crafting things that take forever. The amount of time that is required for some of these things to make is absurd. But the upside is the server that you're playing on, as long as it's not single player, these things will craft while you're away. So when you log out, the game will continue to tick time away. So there is a downside to this. On a multiplayer server, such as a PvP server, players can come and steal your things, destroy your home, things like that. In the PvE server, not so much. People can take your stuff, but if you lock it up behind a door, they shouldn't be able to get to it. So, that being said, I think we'll just kind of summarize what I think of the game. Like, we've covered what it looks like, the general presentation, what the gameplay is mostly about. It's mostly about collecting materials from various places, bringing them home, upgrading your castle. Your castle is very customizable. I'm just not very good at making pretty buildings. And so that being said, if you got some friends and you're kind of into this genre and you like the skill-based combat, but you got a friend who loves to build things, you know, that likes to make infrastructure and make the experience better for everyone, that sounds like the ideal team to play this game with. If you are like looking for like a MOBA kind of replacement, yeah, maybe, but if you're looking for a MOBA game, go somewhere else. Like, it just doesn't feel like this would be appropriate for you. It's not that it's bad. It's like, if you're expecting a MOBA experience with towers and things like that, no, go somewhere else. If you're expecting a little bit of a simple survival game with a vampire theme, I think this will be for you. If you don't mind a little bit of grind, the learning curve is not too complicated. As you build the crafting stations, the recipes are available to you. As you can see, everything I could possibly make is listed here, right? It's not that hard. The only real issues I think many people will have is certain materials, such as grave dust. You know, you're going to kind of wonder what this is for and why you should keep it, or stone dust. And you should. So every little thing, even sawdust, you should keep any byproducts that are made from your resource stations, because you're probably going to need them more than likely. And of course, if you're down with these kind of graphics, I don't know, I think you'll like this game. So for $22 Canadian, which is what the price is right now, it's the middle of March, versus the amount of fun I've gotten, the amount of hours of fun I've received, I would say that it's definitely worth it, but I don't recommend playing it by yourself. It's just not an enjoyable experience. Like, I've played alone before I convinced some friends to get on. It's no fun. As well, if you have a friend who will run a server, custom settings will make this game much more enjoyable, because you are unable to teleport carrying any kind of resource. Dying and dropping all of your stuff, whether or not you're into that, you can alter that as well. You could change tons and tons of things, but for the most part, I think just making it so you don't have to run a million miles with your materials from this like ancient village all the way back to your base, or you could make another castle theoretically, but you know, you have to get resources, build a castle, and create the infrastructure, and then you have to maintain it, because these buildings do not maintain themselves. Without a supply of light essence, the castle will decay, and you'll be vulnerable to being smashed or stolen from. And this is an example of that screen. The castle is slowly decaying by consuming this essence. You get it from almost everything. Not hard to do, it's just something that needs to be done. So yeah, if you're looking for a MOBA, like an actual MOBA experience, I would go somewhere else. If you don't like a great deal of grinding, there is a fair amount in this game. Do recommend going somewhere else. But for the most part, with the expansion coming for $22, well, not expansion, it's still in early access, but the update that's coming, castles are getting a big update. There's a brand new biome. Tons of content is coming. So that's exciting. For the most part, I think it's worth it. Hopefully that's helpful to you. And of course, thanks again for showing up.